Today in the EU, Macron's plan to push Europe's AI policy ahead. 80 world leaders are in Paris today for the second and final day of the AI summit. The summit has quickly become a platform for Europe's renewed efforts to bridge the gap with the market leaders in AI technology. You guessed it, the US and China. The price of innovation had for long been considered too high for European pockets, but that has changed. Macron stated France raised more than 100 billion from private funds to spearhead innovation, and the Commission backed an investment of 150 billion thanks to a consortium of private companies allegedly ready to make the EU a leader in AI. Brussels wants innovation fast, it's clear. But will it come at the expense of safety and due diligence? And how is this AI summit shifting the conversation on tech policy? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. I'm calling up Jacob Wulff Wold, tech reporter at Euractiv. Hello, Jacob.
Hi.
So today you're at the Grand Palais in Paris for the AI Summit. What's the atmosphere like at the conference?
Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome you to this unprecedented AI Summit in Paris.
Yes, so I'm at the AI Action Summit in Paris, where world leaders and CEOs and a lot of different AI initiatives have gathered to basically chart a path forward for global AI development. So it's interesting. It's when you go into the room, in some sense, it's a very big, grand location. There are flags and you see important people going around. There are teams with cameras and microphones. But in another sense, it kind of feels like a trade fair. You have all these stands and they are showcasing some different ways to use AI. So I would say it's about showing off everything that AI can do.
Yes, indeed. This AI summit, it's the third in the history of such conferences, but this time it's different because of the general direction of the agenda and the way it is shaped. Tell us more about it.
So the first summit was in the UK and it was called the AI Safety Summit. And it focused mostly on big risks. So fears that if we develop advanced AI, that this could cause catastrophes, which is quite intense. But there's definitely a big vibe shift to this conference where it's called the AI Action Summit.
Like-minded governments and AI companies have today reached a landmark agreement. We will work together on testing the safety of new AI models before they are released.
And the vibe is really that this technology is great. We should really use this technology. And France, ahead of the conference, has put some really large initiatives on the table. So now it seems instead of worrying too much about the harms, it's about really getting into the AI game and trying to compete with the rest of the world.
Indeed, this is a global conversation. There are 80 world leaders at the summit, including India's Prime Minister. Modi is co-hosting the AI summit along France. Now, is this a mark of Macron's effort to bring the global south in the conversation on AI, whereas at the moment, the main interlocutors remain the US and China?
Yeah, so I think that's part of it. I think a more cynical take is perhaps that France is looking to create some other axis of influence in the AI space.
Interesting.
So now it's currently been very dominated by the US and China, whereas, these new initiatives in France have, for example, the United Arab Emirates, Canada, and as you say, India is co-hosting the summit. Also, there is a public interest initiative that is launched to, let's say, try to promote global benefits from AI. So that's also, inclusion is a topic of the summit, but they seem to be having taken a backseat to innovation and growth at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Precisely about this, the owner of X, Elon Musk, confirmed his attendance to the summit, and his trip to Europe comes right after both French and German courts backlash against his platform last week, and overall a tightening grip on the platform by the EU. So, because of everything we've said so far, how much of the summit will focus on AI regulation?
So not too much is my impression. And actually, it's a bit interesting because there was a large civil society initiative before the summit to gather a lot of opinions from people in different countries, which was specifically targeted at the summit. So they made a large survey, they presented their results, but this did not make it into the program of the main summit. So it seems kind of clear that they want to focus on the opportunities and not the concerns.
Yeah, more than 80 NGOs from all over have signed an open letter manifesting a wide array of concerns on equity, transparency, and responsible supply chain. Do you think any of that will echo in the conclusions of the summit?
You know, there are some declarations that will come out of this summit, but some of them have been leaked and they seem quite watered out. Still, there's a question of whether Trump will sign it because it includes some words like sustainability that he might not like.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's part of the conversation, but the focus is very much on how to promote growth. And even Virkun said during a panel this morning, she said, we have to implement the AI Act in a very innovation-friendly way.
So what do we know about the conclusions that will be signed at the summit so far? What have you heard at Grand Palais?
Yeah, so we've seen the latest draft, or we've seen a draft dated on the 30th of January. And, you know, they try to get all the countries behind it. So it's very much watered out. And as we wrote in this article, some of the stakeholders are saying that basically we've been incentivized to have this declaration and they want input, but actually the declaration in the end is not really very important.
And what you're saying really reminds me of COP and the conversations that we've had around COP. Basically, what matters about the summits is not as much the final agreements that come out of them. They're usually softened, watered down, loose commitments that are signed by a long list of leaders. What matters more is the backroom deals that happen behind closed doors. Speaking of which, the French-based startup Mistral AI and the German-based Helsing struck a deal yesterday to develop an AI model to pilot drones for military purposes. This sounds like a big success. However, we saw a similar financial agreement between OpenAI and the US defense tech company Anduril in December. So can the EU gain a competitive advantage on AI defense development?
I think that's possible. What Europe really tries to position itself for is being a leader in what they call trustworthy AI.
Trustworthy AI?
Which means AI systems that are robust. They don't, as you say, hallucinate and make up facts. You can rely on them more, which is obviously for military purposes quite important.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely an area that could be something for the EU. But at the moment, the main story is that the EU is behind and more of the development is happening in the US.
And President Emmanuel Macron seems dedicated to bridging that gap. Just ahead of the conference, the president went on public TV to announce Paris attracted 109 billion euros in funding from American and Canadian private funds, along as the UAE.
Accélérer, la France va accélérer. Et donc, pour nous, la France, on annonce demain à ce sommet 109 milliards d'euros d'investissement dans l'intelligence artificielle sur les prochaines années. Qu'est-ce que c'est ? C'est exactement l'équivalent pour la France de ce que les États-Unis ont annoncé avec Stargate, c'est 500 milliards. C'est le même rapport.
Now, the French president proudly compared it to Washington's recent major AI initiative, Stargate, and you've reported on Stargate quite a bit. How do the two initiatives compare?
They're a bit similar. So the main, like Stargate is a private initiative in a sense that the funding is private. And then basically Trump, presumably his role in the partnership is to just help the companies more quickly implement these changes. There's these data center projects that have to deal with land use, water access, electricity access, things that can take some time. The French initiative is similar. You get funders to basically finance big data center projects. And these centers are getting really huge. They're on the scale where you're starting to need a whole nuclear power plant to power one of these data centers.
And it's important to remember why this is happening in France. The country produces 1/4 of all nuclear energy that's used in the whole European Union.
And the hope is basically that the more computing power you have, the more AI research you can do. So you kind of just have more firepower. But it's really the scale of these investments, I think, is really exciting for Europe because it's a kind of scale that we haven't really had.
And the EU launched its own initiative yesterday as well.
Yeah, so the EU AI Champions is a initiative is a consortium of a lot of private companies, and it's led by a venture capital fund, and they claim to have 150 billion for this project.
Yes, von der Leyen is unveiling the whole project today, so I guess we'll have a stronger sense of how much Brussels is involved.
So we're really starting to see huge investments and cooperation between private companies in Europe to actually try to challenge US and China on cutting-edge AI development.
Mm-hmm. And the Commissioner Verkunen had already expressed the importance of creating European alternatives to US tech products in the past few days. So do you think that these investments can concretely keep European talent in Europe?
Yes, I think what everyone agrees on is that there's a brain drain from Europe to especially the US, because that's where you really get, among other things, this huge amount of computing resources that you need to develop these cutting edge models. So I think if you are in Europe and there are the same kind of scale of projects where you can really be at the forefront, then it does give a better pathway for talent in Europe that wants to be at the forefront.
However, all of this investments and this hopes to increase capacity and energy devoted to AI also are environmentally concerning, in the sense that, AI is the future, but the future should be, or is supposed to be, according to the EU, carbon neutral. What type of initiatives have you seen, have you heard of at the summit that's discussed the environmental concerns that come with AI, and how will they be addressed?
Yes, so part of this summit declaration is a commitment to sustainable AI development. There's also, this public interest AI initiative is a kind of platform that can focus on these kinds of projects to make AI more sustainable. However, I think, again, the main vibe is that, we really want to build these models and we need to just go full steam ahead.
So no matter the costs, environmental or financial?
We'll see. Europe is, they really want to make sustainable and trustworthy AI, they say, but there does seem to be at the moment a trade-off where the pressure to become competitive is basically swallowing all other priorities, I think. So there's definitely a question of how this is going to affect power markets in Europe.
And that's a question that we might explore fairly soon in the podcast. The AI Summit ends today. You can find on our website the coverage from the event and articles from our Jacob Wulff Wold. Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks.
This was Euractiv's podcast, Today in the EU. Sound design by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada, research and production by Charles Cohen. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news and sign up for our newsletters. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.